scriptural. Need to be opposition to all things.
It's literal. Right? Faith cannot exist without its opposite.
That's right, I know.
I was having me thinking for days.
Yeah.
Since I heard.
I really like that one.
Opposite, equal and opposite force.
Hot unless it's cold.
Okay.
Well, it's Newton's law of force, law of,
It's a lot.
yeah.
Okay, let's get started. Are we ready?
You want the gavel?
No.
I'll get this.
Here's what I have.
What are these two? Oh, is this the audio?
Yeah, this is the audio. Well, welcome to our audit committee meeting for August 25th, 2022. It's 6:02 p.m. We'll get started. Grateful for everyone that's here. Jamie, would you give us a thought for an invitation?
Wow.
Lead us in the pledge tonight.
Wow. It's fast.
We just kind of spread the love.
It
Doesn't have to be a thought. And you don't have to have one.
Thought or a prayer
Or just lead us in the pledge.
First one that comes to mind, my father always told me, no matter where you go, there you are.
That is true.
Words to live by, right?
Yes.
So,
Great, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Good job, Scott. Sorry, but not sorry.
we're good. I'm done.
All right. First item, consent agenda, discussion and interaction to consider April 2022 audit committee meeting minutes. I believe audit committee members have those minutes. Any corrections?
I didn't find any.
Okay.
I would move that we accept them.
Second.
Been moved by Randy Wynn, seconded by committee or council member Ekstrom. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. Next item on our agenda, public comments. We have 3 members of our public. And Susan, if you watch for anybody that's online, any public comments?
I have to stand up and go to the mic.
You
Come
do,
up where
well,
we
you
can see you,
just
though.
come stand up right here.
It's just an awful lot question, because you said that there weren't some here. I wonder how many do you have to have in order to have a
We need to
group?
know who you are and if you're.
Oh,
not
yeah,
a resident.
Brenda Ashdown out of the North Lodge. Yes, she knows who I am.
We all know who you are.
No, I just wonder, how many do you have on your group, and how many do you have to have here to vote and make any decisions? Or what kind of decisions do you
What is
make?
a quorum?
Yes.
Right. There aren't really any decisions that this committee makes. It's
Okay,
an
that
oversight
answers one
committee more
question.
than it is anything else. It's a committee of citizens, couple of council members, finance director. It's part of our compliance with audit requirements. You know, we're launching into our audit. And so it's a committee that was formed to meet those requirements, to have just another set of eyes on everything that's going on financially in the city.
So if you have no citizens that show up, do you still go with the meeting and consider it an audit meeting?
We've never had, we could, and we would,
Okay.
but we've never had one where no citizens show up.
Okay.
If we heard from all the citizens and they said, none of us can be there, we'd probably reschedule the meeting.
I gotcha. Okay.
Otherwise, it's just us looking over ourselves again,
Okay, thank you.
which we do enough of. Okay, anything else? Mr. Anderson? Sandy? Anybody online?
We have to, but no one's looking.
No hands raised?
No.
Okay. Who do we have online with us?
Russell Crook and Stephanie Casey.
Who?
Russell Crook and Stephanie
Oh,
Casey.
okay, great. So we'll go to Russell and Steph. All right, so we'll move on to discussion on quarterly financials. Our presenter is Ms. Jamie Jones, our finance director. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Fun having an audience too. So.
We're gonna move it is.
Hey, I mean, it's like, I need all the help I can get.
Hey, we can still kick you out.
You are out of work.
I'll get the gavel.
Don't make me get the gavel.
All right, so we are discussing the full year of fiscal year 22. So all 4 quarters, and I just want to make a couple of notes. Please keep in mind that these are unaudited numbers, so they probably will change. In fact, I know they will. And then the council did amend the budget in June, so the percentages have changed to reflect those amendments from prior quarters. So if you're looking at prior information, it obviously changes. And then this is operational numbers. This doesn't include like the bond, ARPA funds, or capital projects. So those items are. So I just kind of want to make sure that we understand what we're looking at. So
General fund expenditures.
so as you can see, the general fund, we're at 101% right now. I know the other night, Phil, you reported it was 98%, but numbers are always changing.
Right.
And then revenues at 94%. Aquatic Center, 100.
Expenditures are at 94.
Expenditures are 94%, yes. Aquatic Center at 116% of revenues. Their season is Memorial Day through Labor Day, which straddles the fiscal year. So again, you'll see kind of later on that those numbers get skewed. The water fund at 91% revenues and 98% expenditures. Again, this is an average of all the revenues for the year, but the actual utility billing revenue line was at 98%. So I just want to make sure that there's that clarification. And then the overall expenditures are within budget. Same thing with the sewer fund. The utility billing revenue line there was actually at 100%, but just some of the other, like, I don't know, interest earnings, things like that, just kind of skew it and bring it down to that 99%. Expenditures at 93%. And let's see here. So stormwater, 102. Again, I think that's just a budgeting thing as far as why the revenues were higher. And then this funded well with expenditures at 92%. Solid waste, again, you know, everything is just kind of right there at 97% and then 100% expended. We did go over on the waste hauling about 83,000 in the solid waste. But there were some other operational dollars that were not spent within that fund to help make up that difference, to hold it at that 100%. And then of course, we did make that adjustment for fiscal year 23 to make sure that you don't overspend $83,000 in that fund.
And that's because the
So-
tipping fees have gone up again.
The tipping fees and the waste hauling and all that, yeah.
Continue.
So I would say this is really a picture of how good are we at estimating what we're gonna get in and what's gonna go out, because this is just, you know, compared to actual.
Sure.
And I would say that's pretty darn.
Well, and it looks like the departments have done a good job of staying within their budget this year. Give them a little tip as well. That they make sure they don't press that where they go over, most of them, a couple of steps.
Some of that, as I was looking at these slides, some of that I think can be attributed to North Ogden City's long tradition of not having a use it or lose it budget strategy. That essentially, we see that in governmental law, where if we budget you $10 this year, if you don't spend it all the next year, you're
Take it
not
away.
going to get $10, whether you need it or not. And I think long before I got on council, almost 9 years ago, it's for generations, it's been the policy that we don't do that. And that, I believe, gives the departments comfort or security in knowing that we can be frugal where frugality is able. And knowing that if next year there are justifiable expenses that exceed that will be considered. And we're not going to just punish you because you didn't spend every dime that you were allocated this year. And that's good.
It creates a level of trust between the resource controllers and the resource users.
Yeah.
So it's like they can be actually honest with us about what they really need, what can be put off, what can't be put off. And, you know, and they can trust us to not say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, you're gonna give us a number and we're just gonna lop off 10% of the top, you know, that is ineffective.
Right.
So this is a better way.
And then looking at the water fund, I know some of the added expenditure is because of electricity rates. The enormous, for those that aren't here all the time,
Don't have water?
we're having to pump more water from the aquifer down in the lower part of the city and pump it up to the tanks because our springs are not running like they normally do. I think Rice Creek, I'm trying to remember Dave's numbers, but Rice Creek normally supplies 70+% of the entire city. And it's running at about 12-13% of normal because of the lack of snow that we've had, the lack of moisture. And so because of that, we have to pump the aquifers. 3 lifts to get it all the way up, so it'll gravity feed the city. That gets very expensive. We had increases last year. We've seen increases again this year.
That's why we need those impact fees when they're building all over that hill up there.
Yeah, we need those impact fees, and it's also why we tiered the water rates. So that the higher you are up on the hill, we did that 3 years ago, the higher you are up on the hill, the more expensive your water is. Because we have to pay to get it up there to you versus anyone that lives down here at ground zero, if you will. It's all gravity fed and we don't have to lift the water to get it to you. Okay. Any questions from the committee regarding what we have so far? Okay, Jamie?
I have some
Yeah.
questions. What are you gonna do next?
Well, she's gonna keep going on.
Okay.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me let you keep going. Maybe you'll answer my
Okay.
questions.
So this is just strictly the general fund. Blue is comparing the revenues against the expenditures. Let's see here. So the general tax, 103%. So was regarding sales tax, and jump in at any time you feel. We did receive about 24.5% more than originally budgeted. Our original budget was at 3.4 million. And then when we amended the budget, we amended it to 4.1 million, and we still came in 5% higher than that. So the final number was about 4.3 million in sales tax. And then we also received just some more property taxes, more than expected. And that was just attributed to growth.
Now, I know the strategy of the city is to underestimate that so that you have a cushion. But it seems to me like 24% is too, in other words, we ought to be within 10%, I would think, of budgeting.
And I would agree with that. I think that we sorry, Phil, I think that we feel better about this year. It was just, there was some, I think some different philosophies when the 22 budget was made. And so moving forward, I think that we've kind of done that.
It's also with the pandemic and all that's gone
A
on.
lot of uncertainty.
It's so, and you've come from the retail side of things, right? It's so difficult to estimate what people's spending is going to be. And rather than borderline overestimate and then manage budgets according to that and then come in revenue short, we have long taken the position that we would be cautious in that estimation.
And I think that's prudent, but at 24%, I think
Yeah,
that's probably a little too cautious.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and back when we did the budget, we were right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, and it was all the warning bells from all the economists that everything's about to tank, and we were like, oh,
World will go.
and then all of a sudden you have trillions of dollars that are printed and sent out and spent. And that had an effect, a positive effect on sales tax that we didn't anticipate. So yeah, we were
It
way
also
off.
created inflation. Yeah, right.
Right, which is now something we have to consider, the
Yeah.
effect that will have on spending, which right now doesn't seem to be having an effect on spending. Not a negative one anyway.
Costs It's like then estimating costs of things too. It's like, wow.
I'll bet you this year, Randy, with what we've estimated for sales tax, being roughly what we pulled in this year, I'll bet we're within that 10% that you're suggesting.
Licenses and building permits, we're 105. Specifically, building permits came in higher than originally budgeted at 400,000. They came in at 470, and we even moved that budget to 450 in June. So we still came in a little higher there. I did look this morning. Current revenues are 11%, and that's as of yesterday morning. So
And that's another one that this year will be quite unpredictable. You saw the numbers that JD presented to us in his report Tuesday night that, we're building permits year to date compared to a year ago, we're less than 50%.
Yeah.
And so that licenses and permits could be significantly reduced this year depending on what happens. But we do know that Village of Prominence Point is moving forward. We've gotten the word on that. We have Cooperstown. We have other building that's going on. So,
How's Patriot Point?
huh?
Patriot Point, is that
I
scheduled to
don't think
get
that's
started?
been passed through planning commission and all that yet.
all right, so intergovernmental revenue. Again, I didn't factor in ARPA in here, so this is at 90%, but we still are waiting on one more payment from BNC Road. It comes usually in late August, that we'll be able to apply back.
Is your reimbursements, is it from them?
No, it's just their allocation. We don't
They're
spend
part
it,
of
they
it.
get reimbursed. We just,
Okay.
we know what those monies are and they send it to us on it's quarterly, right?
It's every 2 months,
Every 2
so we get 6 a year. Charges of services were there. I'm thinking this one will be lower just because some of them are going to be unearned revenues. And that's mainly for recreation. So like we took about 41,000 for football in June. And so we got to back those off and apply them to fiscal year 23. So fines and court fees were 100%. Again, we did amend this budget from 165,000 to 205 and still met that goal. So police are doing well.
And bear in mind that that is 15% of the actual fines that are assessed.
Sure.
Because
Because the state takes 85%. So we have well over $1 million in fines and forfeitures in our little town of North Ogden, and the state takes 850,000 of that. Aren't they generous? And they set the fines. We don't even have control over what the fines are.
And then miscellaneous, these are things for like interest earnings, copies requested, police reports, some other miscellaneous items. 96%, and then our contributions and transfers. I think that this will end up closer to about 80% just because we haven't, again, applied those BNC road funds that are transferred into the general fund. But these grants and transfers, and I think we have one more also for the victims advocate to come into. So
That's a good question. Why are these adjustments that are happening this late still going into last year's?
So part of the audit proceedings, just because of how we deal with state and other entities, we have up to the 60 days after the fiscal year is
To
closed.
make
to where
these
we can
adjustments.
apply. Yeah, if anything received by September 1st goes into the following year. So, and that sales tax, like our June sales tax doesn't come in until about the 20th of
I see.
August.
Yep.
PNC Road, some grant money, so.
I had one question back on this one. Did we raise the fees at the aquatic center? Always we've been behind, and here we did good this year.
That is really, really weather dependent. It's,
We did good last year,
yeah, and last year too.
and
It's-
we did raise the
And we did raise them.
entrance rates.
Plus, they changed the strategy for rentals too. So they've got like 2 blocks. So they've got essentially double the number of opportunities to rent out the pool. And so, yeah,
I'm
they're
glad to
just
see
always
that
looking for
in
ways.
the positive, because
Yeah.
that's something that seems like people should pay for, to use.
Well, it's fine, but if you think about it as a park, you know, in fact, Kim was talking about this, it's like, how about how much that park costs per resident? I mean, do we go up to Oaklawn Park and we say, how much does this park cost us? You know, there are thousands of people that come to the aquatic center, you know, thousands of people that enjoy it.
A lot of them not from our town.
But you know what, you have to look at it too, it's like property tax, we have now allocated to go to public safety. It's just like we are saying, we are going to take any property taxes going to public safety. And that means property owners pay to defend their own property. To a certain extent, but you know, the police go to, you know, to other areas around also. So it would make sense, you know, you think of our sales tax revenue is kind of like the big pot. So everybody kind of contributes to it. I mean, even, you know, our sales tax, when we collect sales tax at Pizza Man, we've got residents from North Ogden, Plymouth, Harrisville. I mean, they're all paying into it. And so I don't feel so bad that, you know, other communities are coming to use our facilities because essentially they're.
What are you gonna say, Jane?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, so this number does include transfers from the RDA fund.
Right.
And that's another discussion to be had, is
Right.
if we're gonna back off the transfer. RDA, so it did help to contribute to that, so
Well, and with that discussion
there's that.
with the RDA subsidy right now, we shifted that several years ago from the general fund subsidy to the RDA subsidy because it qualified. And it shifted it out of the general fund. But the RDA also expires at the end of next year.
That's what I was wondering.
And we have to have whatever monies are in it programmed for expenditure. We don't have to have them expended, but we have to have them programmed, mapped out by the end of next year. And then we have, I think it's 3 or 4 years after that to actually make the expenditures. But the RDA is coming to an end. And there's also a general change in philosophy with council and mayor that we want these services as much as, or as close as we can get them, to be paying for themselves. Over the last several years, several times we've raised the rates at the pool with a concern that it would then drop usage.
Yeah, there's a balance to be had there. You start tipping
We
too far.
haven't hit
Yeah,
that point yet. We haven't hit the diminishing return where the price is higher than people are willing to pay.
it's a wonderful facility.
It absolutely is. And on these hot, dry summers that we've had the last few years in particular, it's been heavily used. So, you know, I don't have the skill set to say how close we are to that point of diminishing returns where the price starts to drive away users. And while we're keep collecting more per user, we're not actually.
That's why you don't want to do anything too drastic. You make small adjustments.
Little baby steps.
So
Little
that
baby
you can
steps.
sense when it's there.
And there's a larger, you know, a larger discussion that will be had in the city in the coming year about all those kinds of things, right? Recreation as a whole, football, basketball, baseball, the pool, the senior center, everything that is a recreation asset. What's the proper role for those things?
Yeah, after the meeting we had the other night, you know, there's a lot of folks that probably think we shouldn't have any of those, and yet we know that there's a lot of citizens that enjoy and use those. So it's a tough decision for the council to make on those calls, you know.
Well, it's really interesting at some level, you know, we have some very opinionated residents about what the proper role and function of government is. But North Ogden City operates under a charter given to us by the state, and they kind of tell us what we are expected to do. And so, you know, at some level, we work for you, but we also work under this particular set of constraints.
The park for so many residents kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and that kind
right.
of thing, and that, you know, and then kind of the overarching,
So that we don't have
directive.
slums.
yeah, directive to create a community and create a sense of community. And what does that look like? You know, it's like, wow, people try stuff. It's like, we'll see.
Sorry, back to you.
Yeah, great discussion.
Don't get me started.
Under the big general fund expenditures.
So the expenditures, so this, failed to mention, so this black line is the 100% line, right? So I just want to talk about just a couple of the outliers. So all the departments did really well. Finance was low just because we were without that position for a few months.
Financial reporting, it's all the-
Right? You can have all the numbers.
Sounds like an accounting control issue right there.
Same thing with court, you know, the judge retired and then getting that filled took a while. They're 83%. And then I do want to mention, kind of throughout the last couple of meetings, how Public Works was kind of the outlier, how they were really either in the negative or low, and we just couldn't figure out why. Well, I figured it out. I had found out that there was an employee who had moved into that department and the allocation didn't go as well, and that was as of last September. So that correction is made, and then that made it come in line. So, and then you know, the transfers out again. That will reflect the BNC road money, and then any you know, the extra funds or whatever that it's going to be moved forward over to the capital projects fund, and that'll come with the audit. So as of right now, that 43% is that representative of current BNC road money transfers.
So this is how you know
More to
Jane
come.
is in the position that she belongs, because when she sees something like, that's not right, and she will not rest. until she finds it.
And when she talks about numbers, her eyes glow like mine do when you talk about an apple fritter.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's how we know that she's in the right place. All right,
Thank you.
moving right along.
All right, so I thought this next slide was really fun, just to kind of look at all 4 quarters together. You know, it just paints that picture, right? The general fund, obviously that big jump is the property tax that comes in December. And then the aquatic center, they open it late fourth quarter. They open in May, and then, you know, that third quarter, as you can see, where we start the swim lesson signups. And
Why is so much money in the fourth quarter when you have July and August? It seemed like most of it would be in July and August.
I believe it's a lot of the swim lessons and the season passes.
Oh,
that are
leading up
purchased.
to, huh?
Mhm.
Oh, surprising.
If you'll remember, Randy, one of the things that was corrected in our recent audits was that when when season passes are bought in February, we book that revenue in February now, rather than waiting till the pool opens, as we used to do, and say, okay, now that the pool's open, then we're going to record all the revenue that goes with the pool. What the auditors were telling us is that's not proper.
The facility's been there all year. Right?
We
You don't have to wait
received
till it's
that
open.
pass in February, its revenue gets recorded in February, so that has changed those numbers and moved them around. And so when you have a lot of the passes, the swim lessons and things like that that are being purchased in mass, then you have this big spike in revenue.
That's a big operation over there, isn't it?
It's a huge operation.
And then on the flip side, some of the swim lessons actually happen in July, so we got to pull that money back out.
To pull that back out and
Apply it.
accrue it to the next year.
Yeah, so it's a big.
That's another fun thing
big
about
accounting.
accrual, about government accounting. It's partially cash accounting and partially accrual accounting. You can't do that anywhere else.
Very true, one or the other, right?
And very
Exactly, yeah.
confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
No, we don't do that.
The water fund is interesting. That little bump there in the beginning, I believe that is due to the impact fees. You know, because the utility billing line item was right at 25%, which was that first quarter. So, and then all the other funds, you know, just right, you know, pretty even.
It's interesting as well, as I was looking at this on the revenues for the water fund. This looks different in cities where they don't have secondary water,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because when summertime comes around and everybody starts watering their yards, water revenue jumps through the roof because now you're using a whole lot more water. And then when winter comes, all you're doing is flushing toilets and washing dishes. And where we have secondary, our culinary stays pretty steady across.
Straight off the grid, yeah. So expenditures, same kind of thing, pretty fun. The general fund, that spike in the beginning is just because we have those liability software kind of upfront costs right there at the beginning of the year. That happened. So the aquatic center, for obvious reasons, right, we're open those 2 quarters. And then, pretty steady throughout. The storm water has that bump there on the second quarter. That was, if you recall, we talked about it was the North Ogden Canal. We had to pay the whole amount right there in that second quarter. And then solid waste is those 2 different bumps are the times of the year that we buy cans.
Oh,
So
trash cans.
yeah. And this is a fun graph about sales tax. So Bill jump in at any time, but
Well, as I said Tuesday night, looking at March, April, and May, from March to April, April to May, Mayor and I both were anticipating that June would continue the downward trend. Neither of us, reading all the things that we do, could, in our wildest dreams, was thinking that sales tax would actually go up.
However, it is following the pattern from the year before.
It is, but this year with the incredible off the charts inflation and interest rates rising, home
Should have
sales
slowed down,
dropping.
should have slowed something down.
It should have at some point. What Mayor noticed astutely is that it did come closer to previous years, the purple line, the fiscal year 21. You'll notice in May and June that it's much closer to where we were last year than all the other months throughout the year, with the exception of maybe September. We had a bigger gap than we did, a bigger increase over last year. And so that increase, at least in those 2 months, seems to be narrowing. We'll see what happens.
At some level, it's like we're going to collect more sales tax. People have a certain amount of disposable income that they're going to spend, and they spend everything they have. So it's like the fact that they get less for it doesn't change the amount, because we collect the same percentage of whatever they spend.
And our city is growing, so I mean, you have more people. The aberration is in August of last year.
Well, Randy, you didn't see last night that when we had a presentation that online purchases that get delivered count as municipal revenue, sales tax revenue. So when you get an Amazon package, the sales tax collected counts as bought in North Ogden.
I fought for that for years, back when I was in the Booksellers Association board, and I had most people going against me because they just didn't want any more taxes. But I was fighting for the brick and mortar stores because we got them here, and then they do it out of town. And I mean, who's donating? Our markets donate heavily to our activities in the city and things, and they need to be supported. And so I'm glad they put so that the taxes are coming to the city, no matter how you buy them. I think that's only fair. I was in the minority 10 years, 15 years ago, though.
One of the comparisons we had Tuesday night was of a small, I believe, if I remember right, small retail operation versus apartments.
Yeah.
And it was like a small
crazy.
retail operation was like, $5,000 in property tax, not property tax, and sales tax. Now that we're collecting the sales tax on the online sales, a small, and it looked like it was maybe a quadplex, right? Maybe 6 or 8 apartments, $8,000 a year in sales tax, a whole 50% more.
Wow.
So we're adding lower income, more affordable housing, and collecting more sales tax because they're purchasing out of their house. And I hadn't considered that at all
Right, it was
until
like,
he put that up.
Pong.
That's why he's a consultant and not.
Well, it's just an interesting way that the state has decided to allocate it. I mean, they could have done something else.
And quite frankly, they're, something that we have to keep our eye on, I think, as an audit committee, as a citizen budget committee, as city council, as finance. For the last 3 years, there have been discussions at the state about changing how that's allocated. the population piece, the point of sale piece. There's all of the discussions they've had so far would negatively impact what we receive. They want to, in almost every case, they want to decrease the population share. So that the point of sale share, the communities that are actually feeling the impact of all the shoppers from roads and sidewalks and, police calls and all those kinds of things, they get a larger share. We get a pretty good share right now that's population based. But we also have some pretty good development that's about to happen that will bring in a whole lot more sales tax again. So try to stay ahead of it.
Right, so, the finance department update, we are in, audit prep. Our financial advisor, Gary, and his team showed up a couple weeks early. They got here on Tuesday.
Surprise!
Yeah, yeah, he emailed me last week and said, hey, can we? And I said, sure, I'm gonna turn that down.
James on ball. She's prepared.
So,
This last minute stuff. The last minute scramble.
and then our, auditors are scheduled on October 6th and the 7th to come out and do their field work. Maybe since we're early, I don't know if I can persuade them to come in a little earlier, but I don't want to make any promises, but maybe we can have an audit by the end
Well,
of
it
October.
sounds unusual. Most places are gonna be like, no, give us the latest date possible.
Yeah,
But
so,
James on the phone, you might be able to get it in.
so we'll see.
And for those of you that may not remember, I remember a couple of years ago, several years ago, we changed who our auditor was we went from an auditor that we had for a long time.
Mhm.
And we hired a different auditor who, let's just say that we were young kittens with our eyes closed until we got this new auditor.
They kind of upended us.
In a good way.
We needed to be
helped us-
upended.
They helped us see what we were not seeing, what we were not being shown. We should have been shown by the previous auditor. And so a lot of the corrections, whether it's the police vehicle depreciation that we've had to make up, those kinds of things. There's a whole bunch of things that are, we will throw aspersions. We'll just say that we are where we should have
become more
been
sophisticated.
all along with our financing procedures and everything else. And so then we hired that auditing group, Gary Kennington and his group, rather than to have them as our auditors, they are our outside finance advisors.
Consultants, yeah.
And so they, along with having Jamie, who's wonderful, amazing in her position, we are in better fiscal shape and fiscal, what's the word, compliance? Order than I think we have ever been in the history of the city. And that means that our audits go very smoothly. We have very clean audit reports, appropriately clean. We're not getting a clean report where maybe we shouldn't have anything. So we're just in a much better position.
Well, over the last 15 years or so, we've grown from a little tiny city to a much
Much more
larger.
complex,
Yeah,
much more
and
complex.
with that,
The
all of our
complexity.
departments have had to be upgraded, haven't they?
Yeah.
I've got, maybe we time for questions?
We are, as soon as she's finished, and then we will launch into any questions that you have.
Thank you. So our fiscal year 23 budget was passed on August 16th. We increased with a property tax increase of 24.5. Our total general fund budget is at 10.3 million. Finance department, where are you looking at fiscal year 24 budget? Believe it or not, huh? And then just want to once again remind everybody about the fraud hotline that's available. And then just to report that we did get our first fraud email. We did in July. Was it late July? I guess it was right after the property tax notice went out because I think it had more to do with property tax than it did an actual fraud claim that we need to investigate. It was just.
So how do you follow up on that then?
I wish John was here because I believe he was the one that followed up on it, but I just wanted to make sure that he could report.
So you probably have to submit a report as to what you did.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what.
Well, part of
I
it
think
is
John just responded.
kind of a lack of understanding of what
It
it
was-
was by.
Yeah, it was more, how dare you?
Yeah, it was the how
How
dare you, you are fraudulent people, you don't have the right to charge me profit. Yeah.
kind of along that line.
Well, generally, there are two ways that
Words
fraud
of
is accused. There's evidence of fraud, and there's, I don't like what's happening, and so I'm going to claim fraud and just go on a fishing expedition.
Yeah, you're against a decision, and so you're claiming, but in order to get your attention, you're claiming that it was done illegally.
Right.
Which, and
Yeah.
occasionally it'll happen, but most of the time it was not done illegally, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got digging into the 54-page thing or whatever.
Bless you.
And
Bring it up.
And I think some of my questions have to do with this change in accounting that we went through this year. But for example, on motor pool funds, we can pull up motor pool. Do you have it
I
there?
have it. I don't know if.
Okay.
Was that in the email, Jamie?
It was in the email.
Yeah, it wasn't the
You know
email,
what?
but not everybody printed
This
off
one?
all these pages. I didn't either. I just printed off a
What
few.
page?
That's the one.
What page?
Randy, what line?
That is page 43.
What line specifically are you looking at?
Well, what I'm looking at is we budgeted $939,000 and we actually had 703. So I mean, that's a major variation, and I just wondered if there, and it might have to do with then on page 44.
You kind of got to match up the incomings and outgoings, and sometimes they're not necessarily put together. So Jamie can point out where those are.
Well, I wondered if this on page 44, contribution by municipality, is that where we rectified the problem of the that we had done it wrong before?
So no, I really wish Gary was here to explain this. This is where the debits don't equal credit.
That's the plug figure.
This is the plug figure. So this is basically I believe the general fund portion that is contributing to, and this is the police motor pool.
Because I know that we had to make a big adjustment for the police motor pool,
That was depreciation.
which through the police, we had a 36% gain, which looked awful. But a big part of that was this adjustment. But that's not it. This
That is not it. I wish I could speak more to how this works, and I am not an expert on this yet.
so when you say Gary, is that our outside consultant?
Yes, that's our outside consultant.
Yeah.
But he's been very good, well, because Jamie is very curious, and people who are good at what they do like to explain what they do.
Yeah.
And so Jamie has, picked his brain a lot, and so she's getting a lot of this education from him, and he's been
Well,
very good.
At some point, I'd like to be taught that,
Me too.
yeah, because I know this goes on, but since I'm on the audit committee, I hate to just
Right.
say, well, that somebody else understands that,
That is very
Let's-
You
responsible.
might
of you.
want that at the end of the day, because in fact, we were giggling about it yesterday, about how debits don't equal credit. I was hoping he was gonna be here.
Drives me nuts.
Well,
I
that's,
know,
I
and
guess we
just-
pulled that off
even
then.
There's
they
not
can't
much
quite
that-
explain it.
There's not much that
Just-
flusters Neil Berube, but that does.
Being an
That's what
accountant
we're
himself.
looking
Right, and Randy, what we can do, Susan, if you'll make note of this, please. We can arrange for a sit down with Gary and you and myself and Jamie, anybody else that would like to be there. Let's arrange a sit down where you can help.
Well, a good part of the
Bring
heat
it
you
down
guys
for
were taking the
news.
other night is because of this issue, because,
Right.
24.5% increase in sales tax is atrocious. But
Right.
a lot of it you got forced into because of this issue, and that's why I'd like to understand a little bit
Okay.
more about that.
So the issue that came up, and I can explain it, is the sale of assets should not be this $358,000 sale of assets. That is not, that should be gain of sale. And so what happened was, what was budgeted was the full amount of what we would have sold vehicles or equipment for. And so that's why that number is so large. And then also the unfunded depreciation number in there is not, isn't a number
That was budgeted, but it has no actual.
there's no actual number to that. And so those numbers are what's skewing from the 900,000
Yeah.
on there.
We depreciate.
So we have
But
corrected that.
we're sure that these things are fixing our problem then. You've been assured of that. Huh?
Well, and we decided not to try and take the hit all at once, right? Because we didn't fund, this unfunded depreciation was this big amount. In other words,
It was nearly
assets,
happened anyway.
where things were wearing out, but we weren't saving the money to.
So are we
replace
gonna
them.
have to face the same thing next year?
Yeah.
We are.
Because it's the same problem. We just chose not, otherwise people would be getting 100% tax increase. So we're trying to take it off and, take it in small bites, but we don't want to drag it out too long because that's problematic too.
One
How many
other
years did we
question.
decide? 3 years to fund depreciation, or was it 5?
So we planned out how many years we're gonna take this hit, huh?
Yes.
And then it should get better.
Well, and then also we have to start from, start doing it right.
Yeah.
So this is like correcting the past problem, and then we have to start doing it right. So it's kind of a double hit.
You'll have an amount,
Yeah.
every year, but it won't be the big
won't be
hit
that
that we're taking now. We budgeted an income of $30,000 for the amphitheater. And 258 is what we brought in. So that's probably more of a realistic number that we should budget in the future.
The
Is that right?
258.
Yeah, because then we're not gonna have big
Is
groups
that an
coming in.
expenditure or a revenue that you're showing there?
This is, it looks like a revenue. I mean, a expenditure. I mean a revenue is what I'm saying, yeah.
So it's a revenue, we have a matching expense of 30,000, and then I believe that there were some anticipated shows or
Yeah.
whatnot that was gonna happen on the.
And what I'm saying
amphitheater.
is that probably we're not gonna have those shows in the
Right.
future either, and so we don't wanna continue to budget.
At least not in the near future.
Not in
Yeah.
the near future.
Yeah.
As we get the amphitheater better equipped,
Yeah,
then.
but that's for a budget when we can afford it, yeah.
Yeah. So then it's like, okay, we can't rent out something.
And while we're talking about the amphitheater, I know that was one of the things that many residents were concerned about, a nearly $300,000 expenditure on the proposed this year for the amphitheater. Only 75,000 of that comes out of city coffers.
Ramp money,
150 of that is rent, which has to be matched by the city. 150, and what we as a council decided months and months and months ago was that the residents had to donate and raise 75,000, which the city would then match 75,000 to give the full 150,000 match to get the 300 that we would then expend on the amphitheater.
is that what Blake's effort is trying to do, or is he more looking at he's more looking at the new park,
He's
isn't it?
looking at the overall
Yeah.
park, and there are a whole lot of issues that we're dealing with there.
Well, and the other thing that we made it contingent upon getting the ramp grant. So again, going back to the strategy of, property tax being a little more predictable, that's for our public safety, which is an essential service, and sales tax, which is whatever, then kind of the more discretionary items, that's what that's for. Does that make sense? So it's like, if money doesn't come in, we don't do that.
Right.
So it just kind of makes it a little more stable for the things that, the want versus need argument. Does that make sense?
On page 20, the budget is 650,000, and the actual was 354,000. But it's because of this appropriate fund balance is put in to the budget, and there's nothing that we actually.
I haven't moved that over yet. That would be part of auditing entries. I have to confirm that the 650 is the proper amount.
So is this what you take care of when you get audited, or you do it beforehand?
So,
There's the plug figures that have to make it balanced.
yeah, so I have to make sure that it is the
This
six.
isn't funny accounting, is it?
No, this is government accounting.
Okay.
That's why it is funny. We're like, what?
Yeah.
Again, cash versus accrual.
Well, they're
This is
big
why,
numbers, you know, and I see these and
Yeah, and it's
it
like,
it makes you ask the questions, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just because that entry hasn't been made yet.
Well, maybe when at our next meeting, you could go back and see, show us how all this came out and what.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
You will
with our
probably
audit.
learn some things as you,
With our audit,
Yeah.
it will definitely,
yeah, I hate to just pass over these.
Gary to our next audit meeting,
yeah,
and
He usually comes once a year at least,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think he's scheduled for the first and third quarters. So
Okay.
this would be the fourth quarter. I did
So
invite
he
him,
will
but
be the
he's
next
not
one.
there.
Yeah.
And then,
another issue that we have also is that because these financial statements are complex, and that's kind of what it's sent out that the residents see it. You know, some of them is like, it takes almost like to be a forensic accountant to even follow where the money is coming in and going out. And it's like, how can we do like a, Cliff's notes of, you're seeing this is where it's coming in, this is where it's going out. You know, John does that for us a lot of times when like, okay, this is what we're doing. And he's like, so, and that kind of maybe should go out to the residents as well. So it's not really hard for them to see. You know, it's like, okay, here are the big, and we do this, I remember doing this in accounting school, right? It's like, you look at the financial statement and then you pull out certain things that are kind of like, trigger numbers. I like to call them that cause residents to go, and say, okay, time out. Here we get, here's where the inflow and outflows go, and this is why we're doing it, so that we don't have quite so much upset. I like not upset. I like people to be like understanding, and people can be upset, but I'd rather it not be from lack of understanding. You can agree or disagree, but it's like not because you don't.
And next question, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Randy.
My
No,
next
I can go on.
question would probably be easy to answer, but in the sewer impact fee fund and the storm impact fee fund and the capital improvement fund, we budgeted a big number, but we hardly spent any of it. And I was just wondering why that was. We got 103,000 and we only spent 11,000. 353,000 and we only spent 12,000, and 17 million and we only spent 3.7 million. And
the impact fees were limited by state law with those.
and water fund, the same thing. Right?
Impact fees can only be spent on new infrastructure.
So why didn't we do the new infrastructure?
Well, we have to save up for it. Because those are usually big projects, right?
But we budgeted for them.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get the impact fees like now, but then we kind of wait and see, it's like we have to have kind of a critical mass before we start. Well, and the other problem is that we have is that North Ogden does not like to bond for anything.
Right.
And so because of that, it's like they want to pay cash. Well, in order
But why
for-
did we budget it then? And what did we budget
Yeah.
next year?
for the expenditure,
Yeah,
then it just depends on, a lot of times projects, we think we can start.
I'm
we
on
can't start.
25, 27, 29.
Like Randy, our pond project,
35.
we've had that budgeted for what, 3 years now?
Let Jamie answer.
And
Go ahead,
we're-
Jamie.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
so actually for the sewer fund, where it says project reserve for the 63,000, that's actually moving money into fund balance. So that's just building up the reserve. So that's not an actual project. It should be appropriate fund balance. I should change that title, update that title. For the stormwater fee is because we had the 1.6 million budgeted in stormwater for the community pond project that didn't happen. And when they
So you
budgeted it,
Re-budget it next year, Harry?
actually, we took it out because we don't anticipate it for fiscal year 23, possibly for
Still?
24. I think it has to be.
We're waiting on the federal grant.
Yeah.
Because the federal grant will cover about 80% of that project.
So, and then the funds for the capital improvement, obviously, is the 450 widening project was budgeted at 4.4 million, but we didn't spend all of that. It was because when we budgeted in 22 and in 21 and looking at 22, we didn't know where the project was gonna be straddling those 2 years.
Mhm.
And so because it's budgeted, didn't mean that we needed to spend it. And then again, the appropriate fund balance of the 10 million is actually moving that into the fund reserve. So the 10,055,000,
Mhm.
the bottom, the account number is 404810, where it says appropriate fund balance, right at the bottom.
Oh, I see, yeah. Uh-huh.
So we're moving that into,
What page are you on now?
I'm on 29.
we're actually moving that into the reserves. So 10 million was budgeted, and we don't have that figure just yet. I'm waiting to shake out the general fund for the audit.
The water fund is quite a bit over. So,
The water fund is over is because there's capital projects that are there. We
That's the one we're
show,
living through, Randy, that's the one I'm through.
so here's
on
what,
Footland Drive, is that what
Here's
they're?
what we
we've got the
do,
water tank,
Susan,
the
is-
water
The
lines that
water
we're
tank.
putting in.
And we got the ARPA funds for that, we're putting the water tank for that one.
so here's what's unique about enterprise funds. For budgeting purposes, go down a little bit more. If you look at account number 5140, 700, 740, 750, 751, and then 760. So all of those are actual capital expenditures that we put on the financial statements for council to see so that they can understand, we budgeted this amount, this is what was spent. But then if you look at the account number 760, we take it off because it's not an operational expense, it's a balance sheet transaction.
Services not classified?
Yes, and so those entries haven't been made because once again, we're still shaking out for the audit, making sure all the capital projects are accounted for before we make that entry. So that's why it looks like it's over budget, but we're not. We leave these accounts on here again so that it doesn't get lost during the budget discussions, so the council can see what we've done year to year to year, but we do, but they are not operational.
One of the things that had happened in the past, in the years that I've been serving, when we first started, we would have our budget retreats that you often came to. And we'd be talking about this and that, and I'm looking on these spreadsheets and saying, where is that? Well, that's this fund that we kind of have out here in the ether that we know is for, 740, 750, 751. I and other council members asked, we want those line items on there so that we can actually see and track what's happening, even though we may budget for something that then gets pulled out because it didn't get done. We're not going to get the federal funding. Over the years, I'll bet there's a couple of dozen. And in the years I've been serving, I'll bet there's maybe between 20 and 30 different lines that we've asked to have added to give us
So you can
actual
see it.
visibility so that we can look at it and think, well, what line is that on? Well, it's not on a line that's out here, and we accountants understand it and can account for it, but I'm not an accountant. And I couldn't see it, and it was hard to show residents where it was, and so we have a lot of these kinds of things that it comes in for visibility and then it gets taken right back out again.
Retail accounting was a lot easier than
Oh,
this.
yeah, oh, yes. And the funny thing is like, normally when you start trying to explain this to people, you are been very patient, Randy, very good. People's eyes start to glaze over. You don't have people as quiet as
I used to think that, that maybe I just didn't have a brain for accounting. Right after many years of service, I just thought, glad I didn't become an accountant.
Have you been
And
in
then I saw Mayor Baruch's
government
eyes
accounting a long time?
after he got elected.
Is that where your experience is?
Oh, yeah, I've been doing this about 15 years.
Yeah, yeah.
By city treasurer for a long time.
But
It's a little-
in another
But
city.
she learned in government
It's a little
accounting too, so
different,
she
yeah.
didn't-
So watching Mayor Baruch
she didn't have to unlearn.
Yeah, when the
stuff.
mayor's confused.
trying to understand, and I'm going, okay, if it's confusing to him, I don't feel so bad.
Yeah,
I don't feel so bad.
but
It is.
on the other hand, if we're supposed to be the watchdogs
Absolutely.
to a degree as we can, it's a good question,
Well,
I
and
think.
you're doing exactly what this committee should be doing, and that's asking great pointed questions. Absolutely. Okay.
That's all I have.
Committee members, any other questions? Okay, next item, it's not on here, but I'm gonna bring it up. We had talked about in in our truth and taxation hearing, Mr. Anderson suggested that we have a citizen committee to help look at budgets as we go through budget season. And so we're in the process of forming that committee. Mayor suggested, and I agree, that that committee be a subcommittee of this committee. Since this is the audit committee that's already heavily involved with finance, Randy, we'd like you to be a part of that committee, that citizen group. You've been very active and as and kind of the representative from the audit committee on that committee. Mr. Anderson will be a part of that committee. Brenda Ashdown has agreed to be on the committee. Sandy Cochran has agreed to be on the committee. Now, all this has to be, Mayor has to, because it'll be a formal committee with meetings, with minutes and those kinds of things. All the names will be presented in a council meeting. Council will approve them. We probably will have another 2 or 3 committee members on there. But the idea is that from day one of budget session in January, this citizen committee is another set of eyes on
An
what's being.
advisory committee, have they?
Yeah, kind of an advisory committee, but just another set of eyes, you know, another lifeguard on the deck, looking in and seeing, okay, is that a person drowning or is that not? And the more eyes that we have, the better off that we're going to be as we go through the budget. And I think one of the more invaluable things that the citizen committee will do is be able to help us form, and us on the council and mayor, formulate our communications in a way that's easier for residents to understand. Because they're residents themselves, right? They'll be speaking from, you'll be speaking from
They're all
you know,
residents.
you've got a pretty heavy accounting background.
I got nothing.
Brenda doesn't, Sandy doesn't.
Yes, but
Mr. Anderson, I don't know what your accounting background is, but other
it's more
committee
than-
members,
It's more than accounting, I would
No.
presume.
It
It's
is.
where you put your valuations of how the money ought to be spent.
it is,
yeah,
but it's communicated through spreadsheets, accounting spreadsheets,
Yeah.
right?
so,
And helping us find the correct language to use to communicate what's actually happening will be, I think, one of the more valuable pieces of what this committee does, as well as just having an everyday citizen's view on what is that? Why are we doing that? You know, and I'll just go back to the amphitheater again, you know, probably the question I've been asked the most, why are we spending $300,000 on the amphitheater? Well, we really aren't, right? It would be $75,000. And it's hard to communicate that,
yeah,
right?
and contingent upon the residents raising
And
$75,000.
so a big portion of what you all will help us do is communicate that message more clearly. So that it's easier for the everyday citizen who doesn't come to every meeting, even though we'd love to have people come to every meeting.
You'd have to hold it at the amphitheater. Everybody came.
Which is why we put down systems are right here.
Public comments alone would last 4 or 5 hours at 2 minutes each.
Wow, right.
So you don't really wish everybody came.
Well,
But we do like it, we do like the community input,
You
yeah.
mentioned earlier how much more complex, and I've talked about that a lot at council meeting, with other changes that we're looking at in the city, that we are a much more complex organization now. And more complexity needs more eyes, right? It needs more of that in order for us to, one, continue to have the trust of the citizens and to be able to communicate with them. And this citizen committee is part of that increasing complex nature of what we're trying to do. We need that additional set of eyes. And when Mr. Anderson stood up and said, hey, I think we ought to do this, and I'll be happy to be on it, we're like,
Oh.
okay, yeah,
I saw him, I was watching it.
let's.
I was watching from home that night.
So as Jamie mentioned, we're already looking at the next budget, and come probably second or third week of January, we'll be hitting it hot and heavy for the following, 5 to 7 months.
One thing that I'm hoping that we can have a representative from the citizens committee, just as we have a department that we're in charge of. that we also have a member of the citizens committee that comes with us when we're having discussions with the department head, right? You know, it's like, come
A
and
citizen
explain.
liaison for that department.
Yeah, and explain, how, what resources are required for them to provide this service to everybody. It was really eye-opening to me to go to Public Works, right? And so, just to even look at how complex our water system is. I'm like, whoa, it's really interesting, and to understand what is needed to actually get water to every resident, to get it to every household. And so, if you can come when we're having those meetings too, then it's not just, I'm agreeing or disagreeing, but you're questioning. It's like, just so that you can even understand why these expenditures, otherwise they're just numbers, right? It's like, why does public work, why does Park and Recreation need that much money? Because to a resident, that seems like that's just too much money. That's just a lot of money, but they don't understand what that money is going for and why it's budgeted. So that's a really
I
important.
bet we'd all be happy to do that from this committee over
Right,
here.
that's what we hope. It's like, nobody likes to have a number smack, thrown at them, and people take these numbers and they're hammer them out, on us, and it's like, do you even know what that number includes, or why it is, without a, reference behind it, it's just a number, it's kind of meaningless.
Yeah.
So it's like, we need to know what it's for and why, especially the why. I think that's more important. People really like to know why.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
Do we need to decide our next meeting? When would it be?
We'll get to that here in just a minute.
Okay.
Let's go to public comments.
Do I have to go up there again?
Yes, ma'am. Only because you asked.
Oh, I wouldn't have asked you to stay
Oh, yeah,
here.
ladies and
Oh, geez. Brenda Ashdown, I live in North Ogden. I have some questions. I don't know if they pertain to this, if I need to bring it up at city council. I have about 3. My understanding that the old detention pond has sold. And so that money, what can be used from that money will be used towards the new pond.
Correct.
All of it cannot be used because there's some water restriction.
It's a
something on it?
stormwater asset.
Okay,
So it has to stay in the stormwater fund. So only the stormwater portion that's allocated to that project, which is
Can
only
be
part of it.
used.
It's recreation, it's stormwater, it's, water storage, it's like all. it's
oh,
a
that's right,
multiple
because
thing.
that pond has all that. other
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
Okay,
a multifaceted project, so that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this is gonna be 4 questions now. But Mr. Wynn was talking about, in my mind, in my piddly budget at home, is if I want to buy a car in 5 years, I gotta save $2,000 every year and put it away. And that's what that out here money is that you were talking about as far as capital projects and stuff. Is that?
For motor pool, it's part of the depreciation. We take a depreciation every year, which is essentially setting money aside so that when the useful life of that asset has reached its terminus, we have the money set aside to purchase a new one.
Okay.
That's what the depreciation is all about.
Okay, and that, would that be similar to putting the money aside for like the sewer stuff? Because I know,
Yes.
they talked about.
As
they
you
needed
see
to
those
be
sewer
mined
funds, the
and-
other thing you have to remember with those enterprise funds is the monies that come into sewer have to be spent in sewer.
Right,
And so the money that comes in water has to be spent in water. So on the balance sheet, it can look like we have a ton of money laying around, and we do, but it's restricted.
right.
Right? It's
Right,
legally
and we have to
restricted on what it can, where it can be
Redo
spent.
those
We
pipes
can't
and stuff. Right.
pull $3 million from water and then throw it into the general fund so that we can have flowers on Washington Boulevard.
Oh, boy, that brings me to another question.
No, we
I'm sure that
We
will
won't
come up. Grants,
Yes,
the grant for the pond. To me, this is just 2 separate questions, okay?
Okay.
So I got the grant for the pond, and then we got the grant for the amphitheater. Let's do the amphitheater first. We want to get a ramp grant for the amphitheater.
correct.
And so what we have decided is that in order to do the lights and the sound, it's going to cost $300,000.
Correct.
So we're assuming that we can get half of that from the ramp,
Yes,
okay? And then the city will do 75, and then people will donate 75. What, if we never get that 75 from the citizens, are we never doing?
It's what's called a single fail catastrophic.
Okay,
And what that means is if one domino doesn't fall, all dominoes don't fall.
okay, so then that answers my next. If we don't get the grant or get the amount of grant that we want, then it's
We're
still,
pretty sure that we would get the grant from RAMP,
okay, we're sure, but there's no definite.
but there's no
on
100%,
that.
right?
And then that leads me back to my question of the pond. Because we're assuming that we're going to get a certain amount of grant for the pond.
Right.
Um,
The
but,
reason we're assuming that is because the federal grant on the pond comes in, there's 3 steps that you have to go through. Okay. When the federal government gives you the money, when they look at the project and say, we're gonna fund the studies, the engineering, the Army Corps of Engineers, all of that, the first grant that they give is that piece. 99 times out of 100, when they fund that first piece, it means they're going to fund the other 2. Once the reports and everything are in, everything's been reviewed and everything is seen as being where the government expects it to be, then the funding doesn't automatically, but 99 times out of 100, the funding follows.
okay,
There's
and
not
that,
a catastrophic reason why it shouldn't be done.
so we've sold the old one, we're gonna build a new one. If federal government or whichever government it is, comes and says, you know what, we don't think it's important to do that, and we have to have another detention pond.
Correct.
Then the city will have to take all of that on,
But that's from the sale of the property.
Yeah. So then it will
a
not,
portion of it.
it may not have the other
Okay,
portion.
okay, gotcha.
Right, so
It
then
may
it
not have
just
the
becomes a
park
stormwater
stuff.
asset.
Okay.
Then it's not a park anymore,
Okay.
which is not gonna make Orland.
So there's really 3 phases to what could happen with there. A grassed-in detention basin, right? It's a stormwater asset. So the funds from the sale of that property would be used to create that, right? There's a secondary, there's a recreation piece, which is part of that federal grant. If the federal grant doesn't come through, the recreation piece doesn't go in. The third part of that is the secondary water storage, which is more federal grant and monies out of Pineview Water Systems. If Pineview says we're not going to do our part, the federal government is out because it has to have all 3 components.
Okay.
If the federal government backs out, then Pineview is out because they can't afford to do it all on their own, right? Which leaves us back to just the first one, and that's a detention basin that has grass in a Wadman Park.
And just moving it from here.
And
to there.
moving it from there, if you'll remember
Then
when
it's just in a
Montessori
better
School was doing its expansion,
Mhm.
it was a perfect time with the ground all torn up for us to take. It was a little over $400,000 and get, I think it was 36-inch line that we put in there,
Yeah,
or 48,
yeah.
so that we wouldn't have along that utility
Take
easement,
it back up.
we wouldn't have to tear everything back up, drill under buildings and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, I get that. Don't necessarily agree with it, but I get it.
Anyway,
I think there was something else. Another thought I had in the theater. At this point, we're just talking about lights and sound.
lights, curtains, and sound.
We're
The next
not,
phase.
we're not talking about
Chairs.
the
no-
chairs.
No fencing, none of that.
Okay, all right. I think that
Just
was
to
it.
get it up to where it can be easily rented out to any kind of group that wants to use it.
Actually, I do have another one for on the amphitheater. So we budgeted that it would bring in $30,000 and it's only brought in 250. And again, this probably isn't the right place to bring it up, but I'm curious. Do you honestly think that lights and sound is going to bring it up to 30,000?
I think it'll bring it beyond that.
Do you?
honestly.
And my concern is we have the same rules for all of the parks that we have the amphitheater. I can't see a big money-making band coming in and having to start early enough that they're done by 10 o'clock and only keeping their sound to a certain level because we've built it in the middle of houses. So that's a concern for me. I don't know that which is an issue for me as to why we keep putting more money into it, because I just don't know that I see that we're gonna get money out of it.
Right now, it's a car with an engine and no spark plugs.
Yeah, something like that.
And so unless we
Or
put
bottom
spark plugs
without
in, we
an
can't
engine.
ever expect it to run and see what it can do.
Well, and also too, it's like, think of it as more, you know, everybody got kind of a different idea about what it was going to be, right? And what it was going to be used for. But we have a ton of interest of people that want to come, just small, you know what I mean? Just community things.
Obviously not, if we're only making $200.
No, but they can't do it because
We don't have
we
to
have
sign
to
our
rent the sound and lights. And so once we rent the sound and lights,
Fix the money up.
if that takes all the money, there's all your rental. So there's like a capital expenditure that we go in. And then it's like, okay, now the capital infrastructure is there. Now we can have incremental rental income that doesn't just immediately go out the door, where it's still an affordable kind of thing. So community members can rent it at a reasonable price and have their piano recital or dance recital or put on a little play. You know what I mean? That's kind of more, it's more of a community.
Joseph and the main
Yeah,
Technicolor.
Where it's like we have community members utilizing it, you know, performing on it, so community members can watch them.
But
We may have the one
once
or
we
two
have
big
all of
ones.
those
Mhm.
in, won't we be increasing what we charge to be able to then make some money off of it? Or not?
We'll do a market analysis, you know, for what we want to do, I'm sure. That's
And some
generally
of
how
that
they
will, some of that
try.
will change,
Mhm.
and we can finish this in a council meeting sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Some of
think
that
you're
will
probably
change
right.
depending on what it is, you know, if there's a, you know, a Broadway show that Mark Daniels wants to put on here, with the talent that we have in our area, like Joseph, there is a cost
Yes,
to have the rights to that. And that cost changes depending on how popular the show is at the current time.
Right.
And that cost will have a large impact on what admission prices are.
now I have to say, I haven't been to one of the shows there, but with no seating and no fencing, how do you charge people tickets? And not just have people come like. music
There is a way
Mondays?
to fence it. It's, in fact, I think I came up with the idea of building those little concrete things that you slide a pole into and string.
But it's not now.
It's not now.
So
Generally,
how
You
was it
can do
done?
it
yeah,
now.
you can't do,
How was it
Honestly,
done when Mark Daniels did the?
it was,
play?
it
We-
was,
it was
honor code.
I think
And
it-
because, and people generally,
There was an orange fence line.
Yeah, there was a
There was
fence, yeah.
Safety fencing.
but you
That's
know,
why you
people,
can take down so it doesn't ruin the park.
and people could come and still hear it and still kind of see it if they were really, you know, trying to get in there. But for the most part, these are people that want to support it. So they want to pay their $10 because they want to support the event itself.
Well, I thank
So,
you.
that makes
You answered a
There's an
lot of
amphitheater in
questions.
South Lake Tahoe. A very large venue there. My wife and her brother and their mom, before she passed away, they rented a boat. They sat on the lake and listened to Journey. Didn't pay an entrance fee.
No.
Had a great view, you know, kind of rocking on the boat, listening to Journey for free. And that's one of the things that happens with any amphitheater. But
I love living across through it because then it's like, I can listen to it because I have crowd anxiety, honestly. And so I go, you know, I love having it there. I love having people there because I love people, you know what I mean? And I love listening to people enjoying one another's company. And, you know, it's like, I think it's awesome that I can listen to it and then walk home.
That was a nice band Monday. Monday had a nice
Sit on
band.
your front porch.
I do, it's awesome.
before we get too far off track,
I'm sorry.
any other public comments? Sandy?
I do, so thank you.
I went up there.
You didn't go up once.
She did once.
You have to go.
No, you said she only went up there because she asked if she had to.
Because she'd already done it
Yes,
once.
we want to see you. We want to see who's talking.
Well, can I go over here and hide behind the
Sure you
podium?
can.
Okay, thank
Let's turn this
you.
way.
If you go there, it'll leave you.
No, here, they're not
Over
gonna
here,
see
now the
anything.
camera can see you.
Oh, crap.
You're more hidden right here.
Oh, I am?
Yes.
Oh, whatever, okay.
Told you.
Well, I just want to thank you for inviting me, and I'm grateful. I'm learning things already. Like I used to sit at home and gripe about, these people want to build halfway up the mountains and, they're costing us all this money and, you know, they're getting the same water bill. I'm grateful to know that's not the case. And, you know, the more difficult you make it for a city, the more it's gonna cost you. And I think it's smart to educate as many of your residents as you can. I know in my community, I walk a lot, just because I'm getting fat and I need exercise, but so I'm walking a lot, I'm running into a lot of my neighbors and we talk a lot. And it's been nice to help them understand how the system works, because at first it was all about Village of Prominence Point. We were all upset with Jack, we wanted Jack out, and I was one of those too. It's like, I came here and said, hey, why can't you just make him leave? He's not doing what he promised. And I learned that, you know, as long as he's doing what the agreement says, you can't do anything about it. And so I'm passing that on. And now my neighbors realize how the system works, and they're not just, you know, griping about throw the developers out, make the city come in and do this. And I'm like, well, that's not the city's job. The city has a contract with the developer. As long as the developer is doing what he promised to do, the city is not a judge. They can't come in and take things away from him. They, you know, that, so, and with this, I think when the word got out that there was going to be a possible 40-some% increase, a lot of my neighbors were in an uproar over that. And I was able to help some of them understand that's not carved in stone yet. And, you know, and they're like, well, my tax bill is going to be, and I'm like, no. Even if it is 41%, it's just that one line. So what is 41%? You know, because they were all convinced, you know, they paid $1,500 last year. This year they're gonna, it could be $7,000, and they're just all. So that's a good thing. The more you educate people, the more your whole entire, it's not just those few people that get educated. So aside from that, I do have a few questions. So the consultant that Gary, is he the one that discovered the discrepancy with the, okay, and is,
Actually, it was.
There's Jamie.
Jamie did.
Yes.
Appreciation, it was I.
Okay.
I know, everybody says that it was.
And so how long had that been an issue? Like when was the decision made?
Forever.
Hadn't been an issue because nobody knew. It
I-
became an issue as soon as she found it.
So it wasn't
So
long,
I believe it
because
was 3 years.
I thought I understood hearing in a council meeting, and I could be way wrong because I get distracted but I thought I heard the decision was made to not fund the depreciation anymore. So to me, it didn't sound like this has always been a thing. It was like, it was done correctly, and then at some point, it was decided not to. Am I wrong? If I'm wrong, that's okay. My
don't know
feelings
that
did not get
anybody
hurt.
really knows, and we've tried to go back and look at minutes, and we still haven't been able to find some
Okay.
minutes about
And I'm
when
not
there
here
was
to
a
like point
decision.
fingers and say that is the person that, but that's, you know, people do have a right to know.
Well, part of the problem is that Jamie knows what she's doing and can explain it. When we had somebody that didn't really know what they were doing and was trying to explain it to other people who didn't really get it either, then you've got the blind leading the blind, and then stuff just gets missed.
Okay.
And it was not intentional, it was not malicious, it wasn't anything that was, somebody was trying to pull one over. It's just, we, you know, there's levels of competency that we now have that we didn't have before. So
Okay, because I got the impression a decision, and I could be way off too, because sometimes I hear things that are not said, but the impression I got was at a particular time, they decided to not do what they had been doing because the funds were needed maybe for something else, and that's wrong. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think it was more of a complex thing that it just got, you know, this is my father-in-law's budgeting, right? It's like, I have money in my account, that's all, I can spend it all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, Steve, you gotta pay this, you gotta pay this, you gotta pay this, you gotta pay this. And, you know, this part of depreciation, sort of got forgotten. And so, you know.
Well, I
Because
think
it
it's my
wasn't-
understanding, because I'm the only one here that was
That's
there,
right.
Okay.
right? Everybody
Uh-huh.
else is gone.
Okay.
So I'm the remaining.
So this is
You're the
Charlotte.
grandfather.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
The old
this
grumpy
is
dude.
my interpretation. So
And
Phil,
as
what,
some
is that,
people would say,
is
no,
that
no,
a
but
fairly accurate record?
as I understood it, again, I'm not an accountant,
Uh-huh.
right? It's why we have a finance director. I'm not an attorney. It's why we have an attorney. I'm not a water expert. It's why we have a water expert, and I have to rely on their expertise. And as I remember it, the feeling was, okay, we have $10 a month that we put away to cover all of our expenses, right? And we also need to put another $2.50 away to save for those new vehicles. But we have so much in savings. Why are we, let's just limit. We don't want, essentially, we don't want to do a tax increase because we need to continue this to save that $2.50. Because we have so much in savings already, we can just buy the vehicles out of savings. And so that's what started happening.
Okay.
Well, because we then weren't saving,
Mhm.
you spend all your
You got
money.
all
All of a sudden,
eaten up.
then you're like, okay, we need a new car. Oh, we've spent all of that savings that we were sure we would never spend. And all of a sudden, we're not saving like we should have been on the advice of a professional that it wasn't necessary.
Did this relate at all to the Public Works building?
No.
No, not at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Okay, and
And so now I know more than I knew
Isn't
then,
that
and I look
what
back at it and I go, oh, okay, yeah, had no idea, but I do now.
okay.
So Phil, if we were saving up money and we decided to pay cash for a building, doesn't that sort of deplete the reserves in that manner? Because that to me is like.
But if we're saving and saving and saving, we're basically depreciating, we're doing what depreciation does and saving for that building. The problem is we can't save as fast as costs escalate.
Exactly. And I wish we'd done it when money was cheaper.
And so have we started, you said
Yes,
we have started doing it the correct way now?
Yes.
Okay. And so the consultant, is that like a short-term thing, or is that something that the city plans on? Because this, it
every
seems,
city has something like that,
okay, because it seems like
or sure.
this type of issue, and I mean, thank goodness the city had you to find this before him, but is this the type of thing that this would help us, like not have is that part of the reason for having the consultant? He could, or he and his team could see something going the wrong way like this?
Yeah, I believe last audit, or when he was the auditor,
When he was the auditor.
discovered some other things as well, so,
Okay,
yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
we
should
had
have been caught by the
this
other audit company.
committee came into being because of the audit that his group did,
okay.
saying that you guys really are supposed to have an audit committee
Yeah.
that meets quarterly.
And how long has this committee been?
This is the second year.
Okay,
It seems like the city only needs the auditor. It seemed like we decided to keep the person to look over our auditor, so this never happens again.
So
More eyes.
they
Yeah.
actually, so in my previous lifetimes in a different city, I actually had the state auditor actually call us up and say, thank you for having an advisor, which is scary, and then a separate auditor come in.
is that what he is, advisor, not, I'm saying consultant?
Yeah, same thing.
See, he was the
Thank you
auditor,
for doing
and he did
that.
such a great job straightening us out but he didn't want to continue doing it. But we asked him to stay on to overlook our
You can't-
finances
you
and
can't
our
do
auditor.
Mhm.
So I actually had the state auditor actually called that city and say, thank you for doing that, because they wish that more cities would do that, because it is so complex. And
Mhm.
most finance directors or treasurers or whoever it is that is doing the accounting, and we don't have the software or those fun things that the consultant has in order to build that book and then to have a separate auditor. So there's like 3 eyes looking at it.
We don't want to get back in that mess ever again.
Right.
It
You
was
don't want the
according
same
to
people
not-
auditing
it was
as the
a
same putting
mess.
your financial statements
Oh.
together.
Well, and the other lesson I think it taught me, again, being the old man on the council, is we don't want to have the same outside entity looking over our stuff forever. Right? We did that. And then when we finally, it was like, it was prior to Mayor Berube, we really should
Get some fresh eyes.
get some fresh eyes. We're gonna put this out to an RFP. We haven't done it in a long time. And we got a competitive bid from somebody else. And we said, let's go with that bid. And lo and behold,
Paid off.
holy smokes, are you kidding me?
Wow.
And because of that, a whole series of dominoes of cleaning things up, being, what's the word, more crisp, has resulted.
Took a
And
long time, didn't
It's, yeah, and we're still, you know, in the throes of fixing things and getting everything where it should be, knocking out walls and putting other walls back up.
Our previous audit company kind of rubber stamped it. They didn't really look at, because when Gary's firm came in to actually audit, they were being the auditors. They were like, whoa, you got so many audit exceptions, which are really like, you do not want audit exceptions. Very bad. And so, you know, is that, I think that was when he said, all right, I think we better get another auditor. I'm going to come in as your consultant and help you straighten this out. And then we had another audit company come in and actually do the audit. Because it's kind of a separate thing. There's preparing for the audit, and then there's the people that come in and say, check,
Right.
check. That makes sense?
Okay, so can somebody find out and let us know? You said that to recoup the mistakes, it's gonna be either 3 or 5 years? Like,
Yeah, we.
can so, I'm
go
just,
back
I would
through the
like to know
minutes.
if it's 3 or,
So we're kind of forgiving past sins, if you will,
uh-huh,
and moving forward with the current policy. So we're not reimbursing ourselves for what happened. We're just saying, we're forgiving it, but from now on, this is the direction we're going in.
That's part of the, that's the big reason why it went from, you know, $500,000 essentially. Because we were trying to make up for years past
So did.
and move
Okay.
forward.
Yeah.
And then the ending number was 255, 225. So it was a huge change because council made the decision, you know, we're not legally obligated to make up for those past years. There's a financial reason to do it,
mhm.
but there's also a financial disincentive to do it. You know, it's another $300,000 that we would have to try to pull out of taxes somewhere. And we made the decision.
So this is a one-shot thing then?
So
You-
yeah.
you
so
were
now
saying-
it
you were
is-
saying it
yeah,
was
no,
gonna be-
that was my mistake.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
because
this
I
depreciation
remember.
is ongoing.
Okay, sure, the depreciation, but we're not gonna make
We're
up the
not gonna make
$500,000.
up the past one. Yeah,
That's
so we're
correct.
not getting the double.
We're not reaching back into the past to try to
Thanks, Jim,
to-
because I was wrong.
increase our savings amount for the next 5 years to make up for that 300,000+,
That makes sense.
as well as save what we should be saving every year. We're just saving what we should be saving every year moving forward.
Okay, sorry,
Okay.
Sandy, that was totally my bad.
You brought up a good question.
That was very good.
Just 2 more quick things, and both of them are on the amphitheater. Have the residents ever raised money for the because you're asking them to raise 75,000 of what's needed for this next. Have the residents ever raised any, and how?
For the
How,
amphitheater.
yeah, how would you see that, like I'm just, you know, when I heard, well, the residents are gonna be asked to raise, in my mind, I went, how are they gonna do that? Are they gonna have bake sales? I mean, how do you because I don't know.
Have you been to the pool? Have you ever been to the
Nope.
pool? Okay, so when you, that happened with the pool. So if
Okay.
you go in and you walk into the pool, there are little tiles on the
Oh,
wall.
okay,
for People that
okay,
So
raise money.
there's that kind of a thing.
uh-huh,
There are corporate sponsors
Mhm.
that have expressed some interest.
okay,
You know, individuals that would, you know, for, in exchange for their name being plastered
Yeah.
somewhere.
And a
A
tax
Lee's,
write-off.
a Smith's, a whoever.
everyone wins, right?
Yeah, it's a win-win-win.
A financial institution, you know, this end of Weber County is seeing an incredible influx of wealthy people,
Mhm.
huge. And those people are often very involved in the arts. and
Yeah.
are willing to make donations, I think we'll raise the 75 without too much of an issue.
Okay,
But again, everything else is contingent. We'll apply for the grant, but if we don't get the 75 from the residents or other, sources other than the city or the ramp, then we pull out of the ramp grant application for that year and we move on.
okay. And then my final thing, and maybe you guys aren't the proper ones to say this to, but I would really love to see the AC turned off in the amphitheater. It irritates me to no end that it's running constant, nonstop.
But it's only for those couple of small rooms. It's not for the entire.
But it's, and I've asked John for the number. I didn't get it yet.
Yeah. He's working on it.
There was something cut out, if I may speak, that
Uh-huh.
he did say that I believe I remember reading that it actually costs more to turn it on and off. than
But
to
why do we
leaving
ever
it-
have to turn it on then? Because it's only been rented enough to raise 200 and some dollars. Why did it ever need to be on? That's just, my opinion is, I don't think it ever needed to be turned on. If whoever's renting it doesn't need, the lights and the
green.
sound, they're not gonna be sitting in there forever needing to be cooled off. It's just a really sore subject for me that, and I've seen the rooms, I know what size the rooms are, I still don't like it.
It's a good question.
How do you really feel?
That's one thing you'll never have to doubt, you will know exactly, I can't, it's like my face, look at my face and
You're
you'll know.
always clear.
Yeah.
We have Russell online that wants to speak.
Okay.
Hey, Russell.
Hello.
Go ahead, Russell, just unmute yourself.
Hey, this actually works. Is that right? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? No. Can you hear me? Hello?
We can't hear you.
Well, my microphone's working. Shoot.
If we raise more than $75,000, because we raised 90, can that be taken out of what the city has to pay?
Hello?
Possibility.
Can you hear me? Testing.
What was that?
If we raise more than 75, then.
Who was
Hello?
asking that question?
I do.
Oh,
I just wondered if the citizens raised 85.
Hello?
Yeah.
And that 10,000.
Why not?
Why not?
Well, that was.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted to
Russell,
know.
for some
Let's
reason we
raise,
can't
let's raise
hear
the
you.
whole 150, I mean, that's right.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Can't hear it. Oh.
Russell, we can't hear you.
Yeah, well,
Maybe
my,
you can put it in the chat. If it's not
How
live.
much does he want to type?
Call your cell phone. Put it on.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, that's good.
hello?
Yeah, Russell. No, I just have his address.
No, I don't have his phone number.
Let me see if I have it here.
Can he hear you?
Probably, yeah, because we're.
Tell him to call your number.
Yeah.
You hear your number.
I've got him right here.
Russ, Randy's gonna call you.
Yeah, that's your phone.
Yeah, he's
And how do we do it from there? Do I put it on speaker?
Put it on speaker and we can set it by a microphone.
Hi, this is Russell Brook. Thanks for your call. Please leave a message and I'll get back.
Russell, answer your phone.
Or call Randy back on the number that
Please
just called.
record your message.
I'll try him again. Pick up the phone, Russell. It's the meeting.
Modern technology.
Yeah, it should work. We're signaling that sound should work.
I really like Charlotte's idea of having somebody from the citizen community go.
To each department.
So then can you get it?
Understand.
Huh.
Machine.
He's hearing us, isn't he? Russell, I'm trying to call you. You need to pick up your phone if you would. I'm just getting the answering machine. I think it's your home phone. I'm gonna dial it again, Russ.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Doug.
I'm Doug Anderson, live in North Ogden. This
He's not answering.
rude and blunt.
We like root and one.
This good old boys account or auditor that was with us for years and years, and finally we jumped in and got this new account that brought up past things. This incompetent previous person. What about holding,
It's a whole firm.
but what about holding them accountable and saying, folks, because of your lack of doing your job properly, we now are 300,000 in arrears. You cough that up, or you help us rectify that somehow.
I don't believe there's a legal remedy for that.
We can have them be censured by the state, in which case they can't audit anymore. I mean, we let them know, it's like, okay, they didn't do their job well. And there's a list of firms that are qualified to audit municipal.
I don't think they cost us
Financial
anything.
statement.
In other words, We didn't,
No, I
it
think
didn't
we
cost
have-
us any money other than their audit fees, but I mean,
It's cost us plenty by.
no,
putting us in a
we're just
bad
making,
financial
well, we're
position.
making up for what we didn't pay. See, we didn't pay it. So we haven't,
And that wasn't a decision that the audit
That
firm
wasn't the honor.
made, or that
That
they
just is getting
That
my
was
dander up that some professional outfit that was supposed to be doing us a service did us a disservice.
They-
And even though we're not, quote unquote, reaching into the past to make up, the effects are reaching forward. And we are,
Well, no,
The council made
the
decisions on,
depreciation piece
Yeah.
isn't an effect that came because of or a lack of anything that the auditor did. That was a decision by council. We decided, if anything, it would have been, or if the auditors had mentioned anything, Jamie, what would it have been? That you ought to be doing this depreciation?
we recommend,
Yeah,
which is beyond the function of a simple audit.
yes.
right.
We didn't pay for
Under your
the,
manager's guidance.
we didn't pay for the consultant part of it. It was like, yeah, you passed your audit. I mean, it's really kind of like, yeah, you passed your audit. So,
And when we talk about changes that we made because of the audit,
it was really.
it was more procedural things like this audit committee, the way reports are done, certain things that, lines and things that we have on them. It didn't, what they did or didn't do didn't directly cause the lack of funds being somewhere.
We didn't have great information, because it wasn't presented as clearly as it is now, but at the end of the day, the council is responsible for the decisions it makes. It's not the audit committee. Does that make sense? And so, they're basing them as like kind of that on assumptions. And you make assumptions based on information that you think you understand. But if you don't really understand it, you're not going to make as good a decisions. And sometimes it's just like, note to self, get better information or learn as you come. Does that make sense?
So if I'm understanding right, it's not that the auditors, the former good old boys, as a
Good at service.
they didn't do incorrectly. They didn't falsify information. They didn't
No.
overlook something.
No.
They did their job.
Mhm.
They just didn't notice what got noticed later.
They did their job, just not in the detail. Would that be a correct? They didn't get into the granularity that this better auditing firm did. And that it's like anything else, the more granular you get, the more you discover.
But when it comes right down to it, Jamie was the one that found it.
Jamie's the one that
So
found
you
the
had, you
depreciation
had a
piece,
new
yeah.
trained personnel that knew what they were doing, that found it. It didn't
Right.
have anything to do with the audit.
And there's also more to it. It's not just finance. It's city things that I do too. All our departments have things that they look at that we did better on altogether.
And speaking as the council member, the remaining the legislative person from that time, as I mentioned, you rely on the experts, right? So when when something like that is suggested, I look at it and go, okay, well, in your financial expertise, is that okay? Because it sure would be handy at the moment.
Well, you got two opinions.
And
That's
they
why you
tell
have
you-
Gary and the, but you
Yeah,
get,
they say, yes, that's okay, and you say, okay, then that's what we're gonna do.
Okay, so I'll quit being mad at the previous.
Yeah, I knew you had to be mad at
So
that.
Gary.
They lost our
doesn't look at the
business.
Yeah, Gary doesn't look
He
at the
doesn't
budget,
look at the budget.
Just looks at your
He just
incomes,
looks at-
outgoes,
yeah.
your receipts.
the financial
all this
statements.
stuff.
Mhm. And he makes sure that they're all kosher.
Tracked properly, counted and documented, all that stuff.
Correct.
Yeah, if there's anybody to be mad at from that time, it would be me, because I'm the only one that's
It's your
remaining
fault,
that made that
Bill.
decision.
We'll reduce your budget for apple fritters for next year.
Oh, I quit.
I have one other thing to say, and I think
Sandy.
Sandy already said it, but I was gonna say it. I want her the
Sorry,
satisfaction
we can
of saying
share
it. We can share that,
Yeah.
Well, the great minds think alike. There you go.
and that is that for a long time, I have been griping silently about people who are building up higher on the hill. And I know electricity costs, and I know what pressure, what it costs to pump water uphill. And I thought, how can we get more water for the same price we are, you know? And they're not. That's that tier thing. Thank you
I
for,
think we're about 3 years into tiering now.
thank you for
that's something they added.
making me happier with
And it's not just a single tier. I think we
Oh,
have
we have
3 or 4 tiers.
The higher you go, the
The
more
higher you
costs.
go, the more it costs.
That's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Do those people know that they're paying?
Yes,
more?
they do.
They do.
Yeah, they were all given notices.
And there are some people that care and others are just like,
They're so wealthy, they don't
Yeah,
care.
we can cover it.
Water their lawns 3 times every day. It's
well,
city
and
water.
that's different, is that we put a, you can't. I mean, if you're caught doing, watering your landscaping with culinary water, we're gonna come after you because that's, people
Code
need that to
violation.
live.
It's an
So
ordinance violation.
It's an ordinance violation, but we did say it's okay to, you can water your garden plants, that you're gonna eat and, some of your,
Your trees,
your
your major
trees.
I
trees.
remember seeing that.
yeah. So it's like, there's certain things that we need to keep alive because we actually need the oxygen from these plants. So, if it gets that desperate, then you can't use culinary
Thank you.
water.
And, later, I do want to explain why I wasn't there last night.
Oh, you're fine.
We
I'm
try.
not on the record.
Shall we try Russell
Yeah,
again?
let's, Russell, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me? Hello?
And I sent him a message to call me on my cell and he hasn't called, so
Maybe he's not at home.
he might not be. He may be
That's
back east traveling.
Yeah, he probably called in from somewhere far.
It looks like he's on his phone and we're.
Hey, is this Russell? Oh my goodness, I got you on the phone. Where'd you win here? I'm gonna give you
Tell him he's on speaker.
Well, I'm gonna hand my phone to Susan Nance so she can put you on the speaker here and we'll listen to you, Russell.
Okay, Russell, we're ready to hear you.
Okay, hey guys, thanks for making the effort. By the way, I tested my microphone and it worked great before I joined the meeting. You have the chat disabled. There's no way I can even enter in any sort of communication or anything in this meeting. So I don't know, maybe if there's a way that to improve the accessibility to these meetings from people that are calling in remote, maybe that could help. Maybe you don't want to, I don't know. Anyways, no, I just, I apologize. I travel a lot and so I was able to call in and I just wanted to thank Stephanie for making this known on her page because sometimes I don't get a chance to find these meetings. So, and I just wanted to also say I was really happy to see Randy still involved And it looks like he's doing a really good job of tearing it up. Good for you, Randy. And then finally, I noticed that there's been a lot of comments about the amphitheater, and I don't know why, but it seems like this is a divisive thing in our community, and I don't understand it fully. When we had the opening of with the play with Mark and then we actually had the band, the 349 come in at the early on, and we had a dance party. I mean, I saw everybody out there dancing, and it was just a phenomenal thing. The way the fireworks and everything. To me, it looked like a great community event, and so I don't understand why we still get people coming in and trying to tear it down. So, I mean, I get being fiscally responsible and all that stuff, but I mean, I think the committee needs to really do a good job of laying out, you know, what are the costs that are being incurred, and we have to make a decision as to what are the costs that we want to live with to have this capability in our community. And I mean, there's certainly value there, right? I mean, there's value for having the amphitheater. Some people may not see it that way, but I think, you know, to your point, Phil, you know, we need the art lovers to step up and help make this thing a useful part of our community. So that's all I have to say.
We're anxious to receive your donation, Russell.
Okay. Yeah, right, yeah. Hey, when you start putting out the bricks, let me know, and I'll buy some. I'll certainly buy at least one brick.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks, Russ.
All right.
I'm sorry, I didn't think I was demeaning towards the
No,
I was just asking a question.
No, you're fine. Anybody else? Okay. Committee members, staff comments. Start with you, Jamie. Anything?
I don't have anything. I appreciate everybody being here.
Randy, anything else?
Thanks for what you do to get us to this point.
Second.
Councilmember Ekstrom, anything else?
Nope.
Susan, anything?
No, just let's pick our next date.
Okay, that's the last thing we're gonna do. Next date. We're in August now, September, October, November.
I like Thursdays.
Thursdays, how about Thanksgiving Day? You're bringing the
I'll bring the turkey.
I'll bring pie.
We better avoid that week.
I'll bring an appetite.
Yeah, it has to stay Thursdays for, the availability of the room. So
What did you say?
the Thursdays, we do need to keep it Thursdays for the
How about
availability of the
the
room.
week before Thanksgiving? What is the date?
17th.
17th of November? Everyone good with that? Okay.
6 o'clock.
We'll set 6 o'clock here, November 17th. Susan, if you'll send out a reminder to everybody, and
Appreciate all the information you
And
sent
we'll be
out.
here.
That's very helpful.
I try to get it on the calendar as quick as I can so people can plan.
Awesome. And we will have talking with Mayor Berube so that we can get this committee formalized and get you guys ready to roll. Probably be helpful for you to meet as a committee, a subcommittee, sometime before January, and kind of hone out those ideas of what it is, what you see your committee, what your resources are, you know, the brain trust that you have, as well as what are the kind of things that you're going to be looking out for.
And responsibilities, like what is expected.
Absolutely.
Now,
Well, you'll get
because,
that from mayor and council.
Okay.
We want you to.
because this is a subcommittee of this committee, you would be our leader, I presume.
Yeah, de facto.
Yeah.
I
He
will be
wants to be
there
a leader.
to help in any way that I can. But
So who's on this? I'm sorry.
well, right now, it'll be you, Brenda, Sandy, Randy, and we'll get a couple others. Too big a committee, it just becomes unwieldy and
How
you,
many, you have 5 council members and they each have a department. And I really liked Charlotte's idea,
Yep.
so I think there needs to be 5 citizens.
well, if you have Randy,
Plus-
the 3 of you, and 2 more citizens.
Okay, well, I wasn't thinking of Randy being one of the citizens, but.
Yeah, if we have 2 more citizens besides the 4 of you, that would give us 5 citizens, Randy. Yeah, that-
So when I stood up and stuck my neck out that night,
Are you regretting it?
I called for volunteers and 5 people put their names on a piece of paper, phone numbers.
Right.
We have done some things unofficially, of course. But my idea was that this would be people that are volunteers. And are you volunteering?
Yes.
Uh,
Mhm,
Brenda
mhm.
and Sandy? You're,
We
you're
just-
not elected, you're
no.
volunteering citizens, right? Just like
We just
me.
go to the city, we've been to every city council meeting. I have for the last, I don't know how many years. She has for the last 2. So,
These are our
I've been to-
regulars.
yeah. We've been to,
I've been-
well, I missed a
I
couple
heard what you
because
said.
we're on vacation. But no, we've just been to all of the meetings and so it's just an interest for us.
So what about these other 5 people that volunteer?
Council will make the decision on how big the committee will be.
They
And
probably ought to give them- yeah.
we haven't made that decision yet on how big the committee will be. Right. Any other questions or concerns?
I do want to explain or tell you about what we did. It has to do with why I didn't come to the city council meeting to present what we did. If the meeting's over and the recorder is turned off, I'd like to tell somebody.
Meeting's not over yet, and the quarters are still on, so we can wrap up and then I'm all there for you. Hey, anything else from anyone else? Look for a motion to adjourn this committee meeting then.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion and seconded, all approved?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned.